Demon Hunter, More Than Bones, 2019. Good morning, I'm Aurian Archive, and I can't sleep, so once again, welcome back to Hybrid Theory. Now, you might have noticed by now that the screen is blank. And the reason that the display is currently blank is that I'm going to ask a question. And this is a serious question. And I do expect an actual serious answer to this question. From a manufacturing standpoint, as in you are making hardware, what is the difference in a laptop, a 2-in-1 convertible, a tablet, a dumb television, a smart television, a portable monitor, and a desktop monitor? Serious question. What is the difference? Need a minute? If you need a little bit longer, pause. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and answer the question, and I've made more than a few vendors squirm with this. The answer is, there's not a single difference at all. Every single display device, be it a laptop, a 2-in-1 convertible, a tablet, a television, an ordinary television, CRT display if you want to go back that far or even further. Yes, there were things before CRTs. No, I can't. What would they call it? Oscilloscopes? Now I'm okay. I'm going off on a tangent, but okay. So, television, smart television, portable monitor, desktop monitor. Each of these devices needs some kind of digital signal processor to work. Okay, in the case you can make the case for certain kinds of televisions, dumb televisions, they just needed an analog signal, but they still needed something to process a signal coming in. You can also make the strong argument that all of these devices needed some sort of onboard firmware. While most of the time this can be understood to be a software operating system with a kernel, in the case of older dumb televisions, you still need something that could understand the channels changing, the brightness, the hue. You needed something that could understand the antenna formats. You needed something that did some kind of processing. And then you have to have some kind of exposed user controls. Again, the most dramatic case in here would be the old style television. And that's where you'd have to have something where somebody could change the channel. And we got remote controls, and that brought along with it a hardwired internal radio response or infrared response that changes the behavior of the television set depending on the input that the user gives. Now, if all of these are fundamentally the same, let me pose a new question. Why do no tablets have DisplayPort input over USB Type-C? Why do no laptops have DisplayPort input over USB Type-C? Why do no 2-in-1 convertibles put a discrete GPU in the keyboard with an extra battery pack and cooling fan, and thus enable enable higher performance using PCIe over USB or Thunderbolt connections? Now, I'm going to pick on a laptop that I had here before, the Acer Aspire 110. This was a decent 2-in-1, cheap Celeron-based Well, I already said 2-in-1, so cheap. You already knew it was cheap the moment I said Celeron. And it seemed to never occur to Acer that they could have made a much better 2-in-1 convertible if they had just made a keyboard that had a battery pack, a discrete graphics processor, and just used the same connection, which had to be pinned or electronically USB for the keyboard and USB port to work. They could have just ran that over the USB connection and given user, had an option for users to go, I need more graphics horsepower for the tablet. I'll just buy the new keyboard plus GPU plus battery pack plus cooling system. And Acer just kind of like tilted their head and, looked like that confused corgi. Just, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Alright, the reason why I'm going down this path is going back to one of the earlier slides, and yes, we are coming back to the Steam Deck. And we're going into future products. The SteamDisplay. Now, the reason why I think that Valve is heading down the SteamPhone, SteamDisplay path right now is two reasons, really. And they collectively are Steam on Chromebooks, and we'll bring that up real quickly. Let's fire up the browser. There we go. And we can see that Android Authority has a guide on how to install Steam on Chromebooks. We have a very recent story from Chrome Unboxed that Steam on Chrome OS is so close. You have XDA developers, how to run Steam games on your Chromebook. There was a story breaking over the, Chromebook Borealis. Yep, there we go. Chromebook Borealis, aka Steam, will live in the Chrome OS user setting. This was, again, gaming on Chrome OS in a pre-Borealis world. And this is still using Crostini. This is not a not an entirely native implementation of Steam on Chrome OS. It's still a Linux system. It's still Steam running on Chrome OS. And even myself, when AMD unveiled, the Radeon 7 and the Radeon RX 590, I took pot shots at AMD on Twitter because I was live commenting on the press conferences. It was going on. And I couldn't help but point out that this was the same press conference that AMD first showed off AMD Ryzen Chromebook. The first time that they had shown off processors dedicated for the Chromebook series. And I couldn't help but point out on Twitter that what would have been more impressive? The Radeon 7 demonstrations, the overhype on the RX 590, or if they had had two esports teams come out, sit down at laptops, keyboards, or sit down at keyboards, mice, and monitors, play a quick game of insert your favorite esports game here, and then like midway through the match, the audience then gets to see what the teams are actually playing on. They're not playing on desktops. They're not playing on RX 590. They're not playing on Radeon 7. That they're playing on Ryzen Chromebooks, running the latest esports game, whatever, insert here, on Ryzen Chromebooks. What kind of impact would that have had? I mean, serious question. What kind of impact would that have had? The thing is, and this last stream that I did, I went into a full-blown rant on this. 1080 resolution in the domain of low-powered laptops, Chromebooks, and mobile devices. The entire reason that esports took off like we know it at today is down to one single chipset. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 820. This came out in 2000, what was it? Snapdragon 820. Okay, Snapdragon 820 and 821 launched in 2015, landed in 2016. And that's really when we get to the point where esports started taking off because you had the Adreno 530 GPU that supported Vulkan 1.0 out of the box. You had this Snapdragon was capable of running very complex games in a mobile format, giving rise to Fortnite, giving rise to the mass range of whatever you're going to call them. I wouldn't call them Battle Royale, but the single map, persistent, restarting battle, whatever you call it. I mean, it's sort of like, come on. If you're going to do Last Man Standing, call it friggin' Last Man Standing, please. Not calling it Last Man Standing is not calling it that is just kind of insulting. It really is. But here's the point. It was the Adreno 530 that launched the reign of esports as a practical, as something that could actually be done. And it was the race of Apple and Imagination VR at the time to catch up that brought gaming really to the iPhone platform and eventually the iPad platforms. If it weren't for and what you may not know here, and a lot of people legitimately don't know this, that Qualcomm bought Imagion. And this was in 2009. AMD sold their entire handheld division to Qualcomm, all Imagion assets. Qualcomm still is employing the Imagion team. They just got their hands on RDNA 2. They are now working on RDNA 3. What are these guys going to do next? I mean, serious question. What is the Imagion team going to do next? I think what they do in the mobile space is going to blow my mind. But this is why anytime I hear of a desktop processor that's aimed at 1080 anything, I just kind of tilt my head and go, "What's that clip?" The guy who, I think it's from a Spider-Man movie with Jonah J. Johnson. Somebody playing the editor of the paper that Peter Parker worked for, and he goes, "You serious?" That kind of head tilting. What? You're serious? You're really serious about 1080p on a desktop computer, not a laptop, not a tablet, not a 2-in-1, a desktop computer with an actual power supply, 1080p. No. Get real. I mean, seriously, get real. And that brings us all the way back to this slide. And let me go ahead and turn the browser back off. One of the big things that the Steam Deck can do out of the box is not just have a dock that puts signal out. It has a stand. The Steam Deck could be invaluable if it also does DisplayPort input. If it actually takes an external device, a game console, really, the only practical thing I can come up with is a game console, because if you have a DVD player, you probably already have a television. But if you are a poor college student and you are looking for your best bang for value, going someplace mobile, a large tablet with DisplayPort input would be the killer dorm accessory. You could have your 12 or 13-inch monitor, but it also is an Android or Linux tablet. You can hook your DVD player up to it, watch your movies. You can hook your game console up to it, play your games, and whatever detail you want, whatever console you got. And then when you're ready to go, you just pick up your tablet and go. Because it already has everything you need. It's already got a digital signal processor. It's got, somehow the graphics have got to get from the processing core of a tablet to the display. There's a digital signal coprocessor or processor in there. It's got an onboard firmware. Something's got to tell the tablet how to boot up. It's already there. It's got user controls. You got to have something to control the brightness, the hue, what the display is doing. That's already in there. So adding another input, I mean, if it's a big engineering deal, you've screwed up somewhere. I mean, no, you have screwed up your production line somewhere. Your production line is broken. You need to go back and rethink something because it's broken. If you can't add a new input or a discrete input or a separate input, especially when it's literally built into the USB protocols now. I mean, it's USB is bidirectional. Information goes both ways. If you can't figure that out, if you can't implement that, you need to tell your engineers, you're not very good, we're going to replace you, and go find someone who can do that. Now you might ask, well, can you do that? Yeah, that's actually a fair question. I can think of several ways to do it, but to actually write the firmware properly on a hardware that I don't have low-level access to and I'm entering for the first time, yeah, I'm going to need some lead time on that. I might be good. I'm not that good. And that's really, there are people out there who have studied this. I mean, the people who are involved with the PCIe implementers, the USB implementers, they've kind of already been down that path multiple times. Alright. So, again, legitimate question. Why do no tablets have DisplayPort input over USB Type-C? Why do no laptops have DisplayPort input over USB Type-C? Why do no 2-in-1 convertible put a discrete GPU? Legitimate questions here that vendors really should have to ask. Alright. So, fair question now is, what's this got to do with Valve? I mean, why would Valve get involved? I mean, really, it's a serious question. Why would Valve get involved? And the answer is in a previous live stream, where I went into the Unreal, we did a whole thing about content generation, and we did a whole thing about Build It, and we did the whole thing about competing with Gplay, and this is really zeroing in. Valve already has the software infrastructure to compete with Google, Facebook, Twitter, or whatever else built into Steam already. Valve's got the experience, they've got the software packaging, they've got the massive network infrastructure on the back end. Valve, and this goes back to what I went in here, the Steam Deck is a direct response to everything that went wrong with Steam machines. One of those things is Valve didn't have control over the drivers. Valve didn't have control over the firmware. Valve didn't have control over the boot process. Valve didn't have control over the OS. POS is... I'm not sure if that was a Freudian slip or not there, or just being tired again. But Valve didn't have control over the drivers. So Steam Deck, using a GPU with open source drivers and detailed specifications. Valve didn't have control over the firmware. Valve is working to establish when 11 TPM qualifications while keeping the BIOS open for end users. So we know that Valve does does have some control over the firmware. They are working on the firmware directly. Valve didn't have control over the boot process. Well, and what I have to be careful here is that when I say Valve didn't have control of the boot process, is that Valve was locked into whatever Ubuntu did as a downstream. Arch Linux isn't known for playing politics with system programs. That's considered an advantage. I've never heard of anybody complaining about Arch Linux playing games with whatever you use to boot the system with. So, not having control over... With Arch Linux, you do appear to have control over the boot process. You're not necessarily tied to a war between a hostile upstream and a hostile downstream. Valve didn't have control over the OS. Okay, technically, not true, but the thing is, there's and we'll bring up the actually, I know what I'll bring up this time if you'll give me a second. Okay, yep, that's what I want, and I want this window. And give me a second while I get this listed. And window capture. Snap. Alright. There we go. Okay. What we're looking at here is the Discover Package Manager. And as you can see, I have firmware updates that are coming from the Linux vendor firmware service. I have firmware updates coming from the vendor directory, vendor automatic. I have Flatpak enabled, which is flatpak.dl.flathub.org. And we'll go ahead and fire up the browser on the... And I think if I move you this way... Well... Okay. And there we go. Alright. And we'll do flathub.org. And we see that FlatHub is a thing about giving a distribution non-specific version of applications. And then there's snap packages. And then below that are the actual distribution packages. Now, I've been using obviously I'm using KDE Neon User Edition here. And you can see that I am on a Ubuntu type system here. But I do know that Flatpak and Snap have every application. I mean, I'm actually using OBS that's from Flatpak. I'm using Opera that's from Flatpak. I'm using LibreOffice that's from Flatpak. I didn't use the KDE Neon version of these. I used the Flatpak versions, and they're working fine. And this is kind of the big thing going. Valve didn't have control over the OS. Well, now there are more options for distribution agnostic application sourcing. Valve has expanded the types of applications that Steam supports, e.g. Krita. Valve. Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to say this, and that when I say that Valve didn't have control of the operating system, it does come back to Valve was really at the mercy of Ubuntu. When Ubuntu did something that wasn't great, everyone suffered downstream, and Ubuntu was hung up on pushing the GNOME clique, which, well, we're getting off onto a tangent there. So when it comes to Arch Linux, Valve has settled on KDE. We don't know if KDE is the Arch Linux packages or the Flatpak packages. We don't know where it's coming from, but we do know that Valve has settled on KDE and now has devs trained and learned up on Qt. Valve can now work on in other words, Valve can make their own edits and changes to KDE to make KDE work for Valve within the licensing limitations. And if you're not aware of this, Qt is available under both an open source license and a commercial license. I don't know which one Valve is actually using here. I'm not, going to add this. I don't know if Valve is intending to make any and all Qt KDE changes under the open source or commercial Qt licenses. I would assume open source, given Valve's history. Now, because of this, Valve has way more control over the operating system. They have way more control over the user interface that is actually presented to the user. They have a lot more control they offer the user over which packaging they use. Not necessarily being stuck to one packaging source or another, and then the tool chain breaks, and then suddenly everything else breaks. And I've had it happen a couple times. Alright, so again, we get back to the question, why would Valve get involved? Well, Valve's already done all of the low-level work for the deck. Why not just take that work and reuse it? I think this is a fair question. Valve's already done the work. Okay, and we'll do a new slide. And we'll get this out of the way. And we'll add a table in here. And we'll do display. I'm going to have to adjust this table sizing. Display controller. Oh, I see what happened. Give me a second. That's not what I wanted it to do. Alright, there we go. And now we're stretched out all the display input. The display controls. What else has Valve had to work on for the Steam Deck? The low-level BIOS, UFIE, alright. And what else has Valve had to work on directly? The touchscreen calibration. I mean, technically, you could say that falls under display controls, but, well, e.g. brightness, hue, contrast. low-level BIOS UEFI, touchscreen calibration. What else has Valve already had to work on? Oh, input selection. Well, actually, that would fall into display input, e.g., wiring, display selection. I mean, how do you determine where the? Obviously, it's hardwired, but how is it wired? How do you select which display is being, how is the display being controlled? Are we using a direct drive? Are we using a predefined protocol? I mean, what kind of display controller are we using? Okay, so what else? Well, let's look at our chart here. Onboard firmware, digital signal processor, user controls. What else has Valve had to work on for the Steam Deck? Oh, they have to do video out over dock. Now we already know that the Steam Deck will do DisplayPort output 1.4 alt mode, so Valve had to work on that. Okay, you may say that part of that's in the drivers, but somebody still had to work on that at some point and touch it and have an eye on what the system does. And then Valve had to choose the hardware that went into the Steam Deck, the primary hardware, so they had to choose the operating system. Do you get where I'm going here? What's the difference between the Steam Deck, a monitor, or a tablet? You still have to do all of these different functions. Valve's already done them. Valve's already done all of the hard work to set up and configure the Steam Deck. They're already basically sitting on a hardware package that they could quite literally just strap onto anything else. And that brings us back to the Steam Display. And that we could see Valve adding the SteamPhone system to standard high-performance HDR monitors and televisions, much like NVIDIA did with the big freaking gaming monitors. Why would Valve not work with monitor and TV manufacturers to make Steam Deck compatible smart TVs out of the box and sell them on Steam directly to consumers? Now, this is kind of predicated on Steam Proton being compiled for ARM, running on ARM processors, and running Win32 and Win64 applications on ARM processors over Proton. Now, we have the up here. Wow, this scaling as I edit is starting to get on my nerves. I'm not really sure why it's doing it either. I haven't changed anything, well, display-wise. Alright, so retaining Steam Deck interface for external gamepad, keypad, mouse controls requires extension of Proton from x86 to ARM64 RISC compilations. Once done, the Steam library is relatively portable to any device with a Vulkan rendering driver, regardless of CPU instruction architecture or GPU. Now, basically, what Valve has done with the Steam Deck is that they've outlined a hardware platform or the hardware capabilities of a platform that can basically be bolted onto anything else. And since they've done it all on top of Linux, they can pretty much port this to any architecture they want to. Because KDE will run perfectly fine on ARM, Plasma Mobile. And that's what I linked to and mentioned here. So Valve's already done all the work. And by doing all this work, Valve positions Steam with Proton to be available on any future operating system, any future processor architecture, any GPU architecture with a Vulkan driver or a fallback forward compatibility mode to a Vulkan driver. This is again why I think that the Steam Display is where Valve could be going, because there is another wrinkle, and we're going to bring back up the browser. I do not know how long Impress has not been viewable on the stream. Okay. There it is. Alright. I have no idea why I dropped out. But you can see the edits that I did, and we'll scroll back down and quickly view the other slides that I made. Okay, going through with that. Let's get on to why I think Valve may feel that they're getting pushed into okay. Alright. This is being annoying. Alright, where'd you go? Okay. Is that the one I'm looking for? Okay, that brought you back. That brought you back. Live, people! Alright, so we're still looking at FlatHub. And we're going to do TCL Google TV. Now, here's the thing. There's a couple of competitors in the smart television market. You've got Roku. You have Google TV, which is basically a rebadged Android. And I don't see the exact. I know what I'm looking. Puts Roku on notice. I think that. Okay. TCL Google TVs just put Roku and Fire TV on notice. And this is from Tom's Hardware. Now, I have specific issues with Tom's Hardware having done paid promotions in the past where, okay, if you want to get paid for writing, great, fine. But if you get paid to outright lie to somebody and tell someone something that's not true, say, this product is great when it's actually crap, yeah, that's a quick way to lose respect. Sometimes you just gotta look at vendors and go, no, your product crap, you need to fix it. I can tell you how to fix it. I can tell you what you need to do to make a better product, and then you need to make those changes. You don't go find some better journalist who will then post your press advertisement without doing the work. I mean, come on, even Dilbert's taking shots at how bad it's gotten. Alright. The thing is, and we're going to go, this is what I really wanted to bring up, is that TCL is pushing Android Linux into their televisions. They're going up against the other two major players for smart television operating systems, and ignoring Apple for a second here, which is quite easy to do given market share. Not market cap. There's a difference between market share and market cap. But market share, we can kind of say that Apple's not really a factor, and as far as I know, Apple's not really putting out a smart television of their own. They do have the Apple TV, but last time I checked, that was just a box. Let me double check that. Alright, Apple TV, watch across all your devices. Okay, it's just a streaming service. It isn't actually a television. It is supported on a wide variety of platforms, though. So, just what I want to make sure is that our biggest factors to think about here are Amazon, Roku, and Android. Well, let's turn Opera off because I've already got a slide in here. And as I find it, hardware vendors, software vendors, and consumers no longer trust Google to manage Android. It's a simple statement. Nobody trusts Google to manage Android. And the prime example right now, the one I'm running into, is Google has adopted the hit and dash development of the Gates-Ballmer era Microsoft. They've created a massive problem with Android Auto on Android 11, and they've basically stopped working on Android 11, started working on Android 12. They're already pushing Android 12 out to Pixel phones, and Android Auto users with non-Pixel phones are kind of going, whoa, 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 wait, fix our phones, fix your software first. And Google's like, nope, we're not going to. We're just going to go ahead. Well, the thing is, there are lots of vendors. They want an answer to Google. They want somebody who has a software platform already set up. They want somebody who already do games, already do the applications, somebody who's familiar with the kinds of systems that the vendors are using, somebody who will offer them an alternative to Google. Valve's the easy choice here. I mean, it's not even a contest. I mean, can you imagine if you were a small company like Umidigi or Ulefone or Blackview? Can you imagine what would happen if if someone from Valve showed up at your door and said, "Hey guys, you know what? We'd like to move all of your staff and factory to the USA, and we'd like you to make your phones in our factories, and we'd like you to use Steam Linux." And how do you think those phone manufacturers would respond if they had an opportunity to push a phone platform that is highly optimized for gaming, with a software stack that is by someone who is interested in the gaming side, by a vendor who's interested in the industrial quality of a device, not how quickly it can be stamped out, not how cheaply it can be made, but how well it can be made? What would happen? That's a serious question. Do I think that Valve is actually out there looking for a mobile phone vendor to buy so that they have a process manufacturing way in? No, I don't think so. I think that this is a case where a partnership would make much more sense than an acquisition. But we don't know how aggressive Valve wants to take the fight to Google and Amazon. We don't know how aggressive Valve wants to be when it comes to making Steam the default mobile gaming centric system, not Google Play. We don't know how serious Valve is in iterating on the Steam Deck and bringing forth new hardware revisions. What we do know, and we'll do a new slide for this, and we'll go ahead and answer these. We'll go ahead and make these questions. So we'll go ahead and get rid of everything here. One of these days I'm going to stop doing that. Slide, new slide. Control A. Oh! What the? It's like, I know what I did. I can't believe I just did that. Good thing there's an undo function. Okay, so, questions. How serious is Valve at taking the fight to Google, Facebook, Twitter, to become the default mobile social network. Okay, you know what? I really should have just put this in a text box. And we'll shrink this down. We'll come up with a title in a minute or two. Actually, I know. How serious? I can hear some DC fans screaming now. Why so serious? Easy, it's a serious question. How serious is Google about taking the mobile fight to Android, Linux? How serious is Google about taking the social networking fight to Google, Facebook, Twitter? How serious is Google? Wow. Really, me? Yes, I'm tired. How serious is Valve about? And I'm about to start cranking the music in my ears. You may have noticed I'm still playing Demon Hunter right now. We are on the last one alive, Demon Hunter Extremist 2014. How serious is Valve about iterating on the Steam Deck and different hardware configurations? How serious is Valve about an open source, top to bottom, boot to UI, boot to user interface, software stack, and firmware? How serious is Valve about making Steam the default go-to mobile gaming option? And I think I can answer this in just one statement. How much money has Valve spent on Proton anyways? How much money on bringing Windows gaming to Linux? Didn't Valve put their own pocketbooks on the line? Yes, they did. Valve really did. And that's the catch here. And that's why I'm coming back to this slide. Why I do think that Steam Deck, the SteamPhone, the SteamDisplay is really the trajectory that Valve is on. Valve put an awful lot of work into competing, maybe not directly right now, but indirectly with the major social networks, with the major streaming networks, with the major video networks, on creating user content, on getting it online, on making it available. Valve made a lot of work into that. They've made a lot of work on engines. We may not hear a whole lot about Source these days. That doesn't mean that Valve stopped working on it. We don't hear a lot about the background improvements to Steam, because Valve just put their heads down and they just worked. So we consider everything that the Steam Deck could do that we just don't know about yet. We consider about, why would Valve get involved? Why would Valve search out and make partnerships? Why would Valve go into the business or get involved with the business of bringing SteamOS and the Steam Deck system to mobile phones, to tablets, to television displays sitting in your home? We come back to, the simple statement that hardware vendors, software vendors, and consumers no longer trust Google to manage Android. TCL may have made a great smart TV. They really may have. I don't know. I don't know anyone at TCL. Uh, I don't know anyone at any of the television vendors, and well, Samsung's not really happy with me after I slagged on one of their curved televisions, the one I actually have, because it's okay. Don't get me wrong, the display quality is beautiful, but as a television to use, it is awful. It has no concept. I mean, zero concept of input permanence. And I had a cheap Vizio before the Samsung, and the Vizio, when I told it that port 4 was PlayStation 4, and I named it PlayStation 4 and gave it specific settings for port 4, it kept those settings. As soon as the PlayStation turns off, as far as the Samsung is concerned, there's no PlayStation there, and when I turn it back on, detecting smart device. You can use your remote to control the device from the remote. No, it's a PlayStation 4. I told you to turn on FreeSync. Turn FreeSync back on. Don't. I told you what it was. Yeah, I hate my television. So yeah, some of this may just be biased towards what I'd like to see Google to do because there are so many easy targets here, and I feel sure that other television vendors, those who make Roku products or those who may have cut deals with Amazon, they might be, might look at Valve and go, okay, if we can get Steam Deck as a integrated streaming option and we just use the boot code and the low-level system code and everything that Valve's already done to get Steam and everything else up and running on the Steam Deck, if they just took that whole low-level system and just applied it to a television and just gave you the ability to select more inputs, instead of having worrying about providing an HDMI port or providing whatever ports, just have like a rack of 8 USB Type-C ports, and every single one of them does DisplayPort input. And that way you can just, either you can plug up your HDMI cable to USB Type-C adapter, you could plug up your component cable to DisplayPort adapter, you could plug up your VGA cable to DisplayPort adapter, and DisplayPort would just handle the rest of it, and boom, you got your display. You've got your HDCP protection, you've got your encrypted content, you still can use all of your pre-existing PlayStation, Xbox, GameCube, Dreamcast, Saturn, Genesis. You could do it all over USB Type-C, save a metric ton of port space on the back, and vastly simplify the construction of a television. But you gotta have a low-level system that does that first. And Valve built one. And Valve's gotten to the point where they're like, screw it, we're going to make our own hardware and show people how it's done. And that's again coming back to this slide. Why I think that SteamDisplay is where Valve is going with this. Because the idea of streaming, or just running locally, or just having a more powerful device, or being able to do additive performance, that's the other thing. If you had like a Steam box built into the back of your television that's running on an ARM processor, and you just plug in a USB Type-C running Thunderbolt 5 or Thunderbolt 6 dock with an external GPU, suddenly your television can now be rendering all of those complex environments, even if it has just like maybe a 16-core ARM processor at the core of it all. And this is, again, I think this is where Valve could be going. And I could be wrong. Regardless, we're coming up on 54 minutes, so we're approaching my hour cutoff time. So we'll go ahead and kind of turn it off here. I think I've now worked through everything that's actually on the slide. I think I've worked through why Valve would get involved. Valve's already involved. The Steam Deck is just the opening shots. Valve's already done all of this low-level work. It's not going to surprise me if next year we see SteamPhone show up, and then a couple months after that we see Valve offering a Steam television that is a Q8 that is a QHD class 144 hertz 45, 48, 52-inch televisions with, like I said, I'm probably thinking that Valve's going to be looking at a 16-core ARM processor, probably with RDNA 2 or RDNA graphics inbuilt. They may go with, depending on how Zen 3 and Zen 4 work out, they may actually do a Zen system for that, regardless of however that goes. I think that's where we're going to see Valve going, and I think we're going to see vendors take a look at what's going on with Google, take a look at what's going on with Amazon, and go, the software package Valve is putting together, the open source top to bottom, boot to UI, software stack, and firmware. How serious is Valve? Serious enough that they put their own money on the line. They've done all this work. Do we really expect Valve to just stop at just a Steam Deck? Do we really think that's the end? I don't. I think we need to be ready for Valve to go full-blown war against Google. And Google has ticked off so many consumers, ticked off so many developers, ticked off so many vendors, that Valve may not even have to try. They may have already won that war before it's even started. We may not even have to worry about an antitrust suit to bring down Google. We may not have to worry about Android Linux being forcibly spun off and put under the management of an open board of directors with three of the board selected by the new Android company, and three of the board selected by Android developers voting. Are you an Android developer? Do you have a vested interest? Then you can, here's the XDA forums. We'll use them as the voting source because that's probably where you're going to be getting together. Hey, that's just the common sense point of view of it is. The market is primed for a revolution. Valve has not tipped all of their cards. They're not telling us everything. We know they're serious. We know they're in this to win, not just to pull an RX 590 and dribble a foul ball into double play that puts the company down and out. They're in this swinging for the fences. They're in this to be the next Ryzen, they just slammed it out of the park. They just made everyone turn their heads and go, what just happened? That's how serious I think Valve is. This has been Hybrid Theory. I'm Aurian Archive.